Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is to the reorientation event for political science students. This is the first year we've held it. We'll talk a little bit about the nature of the exercise, then I'll introduce you to our first set of speakers, and then each of them will speak for up to 20 minutes, and then we'll have a kind of panel discussion for the rest of our first hour. And of course, as you can tell from the outline here, for the rest of your time this afternoon, we're going to be breaking into three workshops, which I think will each be quite valuable for you, and I'll be dropping in on each of them as well. What is this all about? The Faculty of Arts and Sciences has a STEP program, which is a program designed to help undergrad students feel like they're part of an educational experience, something more than going to class, writing essays, getting your marks, going home. That it's connected to other parts of your life, and also that in some sense there's an orientation to your career and to your lifelong project. What is this all about? How does what I'm doing in the classes I take every year and the assignments I complete, how does that relate to other things in my life? How do I orient myself in those terms? That at least is the reorientation, is at least the theme of one part of the STEP project, and of the part that this exercise this afternoon is sponsored under. Reorienting yourself. Most of you will be second year. How many of you are second year students? How many of you are other years? About half and half and half. Well, usually people declare a major or a specialty or a minor at the beginning of their second year, but you can declare them, of course, at other times as well. And we're glad you're all here. So having started university a year ago or before that, and taken a bunch of courses, now you're in a situation where you've chosen our department, and we're really happy about that, to do your specialty in, or a major or a minor. And we thought this exercise this afternoon, and then associate you're going to be going to tonight, this evening, which is sponsored by the Undergraduate Political Science Association, would help you build those other linkages to other things going on in your life, and also to your later career activities, and also pick up some useful skills. So the three workshops this afternoon are on writing and research, the core elements of your academic exercise, but also will be relevant for everything else you do in life, and then also one on careers. Okay. The first part that we're having this afternoon is a more general starting point. We're going to have three speakers, and I'll introduce each of them briefly, and then each of them will speak for some time, or a little while, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion. The first speaker will be Professor Lou Pawley. He's the department chair. He's a longtime member of our department, specialist in international political economy. Department of 65, 70 faculty across the three campuses, maybe 45 of those are downtown. A massive undertaking to be chair of our department. He's going to talk about the discipline or studying political science at U of T. The other two speakers in our first section, Barbara Dick is the first. Barbara Dick is Assistant Vice President, Alumni Affairs. She has a career at U of T. She did a political science degree. She's going to talk about what it's like to have had that experience of having a political science degree, and looking back on her experience, and well, she'll tell you from there what she wants to say. So somebody who's gone through political science and is now looking back at the experience and its value to her. And the third speaker is Delilah Bekic, who is a fourth-year student in political science, and she's going to look at a shorter time horizon. She's still in political science as an undergrad at U of T, and she's going to talk about what she might have done differently, what she really liked, and whatever else she wants to talk about. Okay, so first of all, Lou. Professor Lou Pawley.
Thank you. This is a great idea. It's an experiment. There were a lot of people invited, and 80 responded, and then the weather turned beautiful. So your job is to take in as much as you can, but then share what you learn with as many friends as you can. Not necessarily from the political science department, but let's keep the attention on political science for today. And department website will have our remarks online for a little while, so that you can recommend that people go there if you think this was a valuable experience. Now, before I talk very specifically about the department, and I do have a couple of very specific bits of advice for you, I want to put it into a larger context, which is the context of the University of Toronto. And it's the context of a very large university, as you know. It's a context where most people are overwhelmed during the orientation period during the first year, don't really retain much. It's a context where actually now that you're here for a year, you can start to actually put some practical steps into place that will make this a great place for you, and a place that you'll remember, and a place that you'll send your friends and your children to. 2 stories. My wife and I were at a party about 3 years ago in Toronto, a house party. And I met there a young woman who had just graduated from the University of Toronto. And she was a little bit shy, but we started to talk a little bit. I said, so you finished at U of T? And she didn't know who I was, right? She didn't know where I worked. She didn't know my department. I said, so you finished at U of T. What did you study? She said, political science. Oh, how was your experience? She said, not very good. He said, I said, what were the issues? She said, well, classes were very big, and I didn't have a lot of fun. And then I said, so do you remember the names of any of your teachers? She said, no. A couple of them were pretty good, but I don't remember them. I don't remember their names. And they said, so just tell me, what was your daily experience like? She said, well, I lived at home. I went into university when I had classes, which were 2, maybe sometimes 3 days a week. Got on the subway, went to the university, attended my classes, and I said, then what'd you do? Well, I came home. So I said, you know what? I think I see the problem. And then I explained what my profession was and where I worked, and specifically how happy I was in the political science department. And this was before I became the department chair. Second story, another student. A couple of years before this, the student was living at home. Nothing wrong with living at home, especially in an expensive city like Toronto. Given all the other stresses and strains that people are dealing with, if you have the opportunity to save a little money, why not? This student lived at home. But this student, I got pretty close to him because he took our 4th year seminar with me. We got to know one another pretty well. He didn't spend any time at home. He slept at home. And I said, you know, when we had a very similar conversation, I asked him what his daily life was like. He said, well, I get up in the morning, I come to university, I spend the whole day at the university, 5 days a week. So what do you do? I said, well, I have some pretty good classes, but I don't spend more time than I need to there. I'm very busy at Hart House. He was in 4th year. He said he was the head of the debates club. And he was very active in his college, which was, as I recall, University College. And he was involved in a couple of other activities. He was a very outgoing person. He was not shy, but he was not annoying. He was not overly assertive. He was somebody who just grabbed life, built networks, made friends. Now, we can't claim credit for all of this, but I think a couple of key faculty members probably did make a difference He went on, and he went on to leave the department and won a Rhodes Scholarship, went to Oxford, came back here, went to law school, and he's now got a pretty big job in Ottawa. Now, what's the difference between those two students? One took advantage of all the resources that are available at U of T, and the other didn't. Now, in very practical terms, in whatever department people are a part of, how many, you're now in second, some of you I think are probably in third year, right? Some of you in third year, starting third year. I'm not gonna put you on the spot, but I've been here for 32 years. Like everybody else, I'm in my office for 2 hours a week at least, with an open door for the students. Now, most of the time, except around exam time and term paper time, I sit there by myself. You know, maybe I'm not the nicest guy in the world, but you know, I'm not that scary. Don't talk to my wife about that, but I think that is the case. Now, of the students who have come to see me in those 32 years, usually around exam time and term paper time, how many have asked me, you know, Professor Pauly, I'm interested in this field, and next year I want to continue in this field or that field within political science. What courses should I take? What's your advice? 2 people. 2 people. Even after, sometimes in an undergraduate class, I'll have a discussion just like this at the beginning of class. Right? 2 people. We will always tell you, look, this professor is here next year. She is a star. I know you're not particularly interested in that subject, but take that subject with that professor, because I happen to know that that professor is on leave the next year when you graduate. So it's now or never, don't miss her. Things like that. Only 2 students have asked for that advice. Now, I have willingly given that kind of advice, even when not asked. But that's just a little hint of what I'm talking about. And you already know, especially if you've been here for at least a year, this is not a place for shy people. If you are naturally shy, you've got to grow out of it. You've got to force yourself to be assertive without being obnoxious. You've got to force yourself to go visit a professor, even if you think she or he is slightly intimidating. You'll find that they're probably a little more relaxed in their offices. Now, don't go every week. Have a little bit of an excuse. Don't expect to spend too much time. But if you have specific questions, like the one I just asked, there's not one colleague in the department who would not answer those questions for you. And now, don't necessarily listen to the advice of one person. Get advice from different people, but at least get the advice. Now, secondly, and this is not to do directly with our department, this university, and by the way, faculty have the same impression when they first get here. It's an overwhelming place. People are nice, but it's very easy to get lost. And because it's very big, it's a little bit bureaucratic. So what you have to do very often, in addition to finding a friendly professor, is be nice to the staff and ask the staff, like Liz and Lauren, who run our undergraduate program. They are fantastic people and tremendous resources. They will help you solve your problems. They will help you find your way through our sometimes very complicated bureaucracy. And if it's possible to get an exception to a rule, which it very often is, they will help you. And the faculty will help you too. And our department actually is famous for this. Aside from my friend, I would say my friend, the first friend in that first story, it was not a representative sample. But I think the pattern that she fell into is a pattern that's very easy to fall into at the university and in our department. We are in terms of undergraduate specialists, majors, and minors, we are in the top 5 5 or 6. It bounces up a little bit, you know, here and there every year. There's little changes, but we're a very large department. It is very easy to get lost. Don't get lost. It's your responsibility. We will help you, but it's your responsibility. It's your education. This is not high school. It's your education. So if any of your friends have a story like my first friend, at the end of 4 years here, it's their fault. Now, what's on the other side of it? The other side, outside of our classrooms. Take advantage of all the opportunities. Now, political science is very well positioned to point you to, and actually there's kind of a natural synergy with lots of the social activities at Hart House. Many of them are often directly connected with our courses. College programs, often very directly connected with our programs. Get involved in your colleges. The fact that people don't take advantage of their college, for whatever reason, they only register there. Again, that's mostly, that is a readily resolvable problem, mostly by not taking no for an answer and getting to know people. And there are a couple of college programs that are direct outgrowths of our department. At least, let's say the joint program, for instance, is called International Relations. It's half history and half political science. It is not a program on its own. It depends on political science to run. There are other programs across the university where we have some natural connections both to curricular programs and to extracurricular programs. Take advantage of those synergies. I mean, if you're interested in a political career, for instance, in the long run, get involved in debate club, in various debate societies at colleges as well as at Hart House. It'd be a very useful tool. Just getting up and learning to speak in front of a group is something you can walk away from the university with, and you know, you don't pay for that. It's outside the classroom. It's a resource that's there for you. Just do it. Now, political science lends itself naturally to these things because you've probably already discovered that we are naturally interdisciplinary. Inside, one of the reasons to major in political science, the choice that you've already made, is that it's not a narrow discipline. As a matter of fact, there's a huge debate, even inside our department. Is it really a science? Well, first of all, we can have a long debate about what we mean by science and what does it take to be a science. But let's forget that for the moment. At the core of our field is the study of politics, which Harold Lasswell, a famous political scientist who died many years ago, said is the study of who gets what, when, and how. Now, just to get to the essence of that, you need to be interdisciplinary. So in our department, you need to start with a whole group of courses and a whole group of colleagues who in other universities are actually located in a philosophy department. By majoring in political science, you actually get to do an automatic double major in philosophy and empirical politics. All you have to do is take advantage of it. I don't know what the number is now, maybe a third of our colleagues are political theorists, which means, well, if they're not officially political theorists, they're unofficially political theorists, which means they're political philosophers. And they are, you know, the adjective world class is overused. These are first class people. These are people who win the biggest prizes in the world in their field. They're first class people. And because a lot of them are Canadians, now they're not all Canadians. We have a big global department, but because they're Canadians, you know what? There's something, they don't brag about themselves. And they are just usually a pretty approachable people. But make no mistake, outside of the university, outside of Toronto, in the global arena, they're world famous. Everybody knows them. Just give you one example. Joe Cairns just won the biggest prize from the biggest political science association in the world, for his new book on the ethics of immigration. So what I really would like our students to broaden out, and they can broaden out naturally in our department by starting with philosophy. So at least a couple of courses in political theory which will count towards your major or your specialist program, or your minor. And then the choice of various empirical applications. Canadian politics, American politics, comparative politics, international relations, which is a pretty broad program these days, now encompassing most of my colleagues in international relations they're still political scientists, but they happen to have their offices in the Munk School of Global Affairs. They still teach undergraduates. They're part of us. This public policy, the School of Public Policy and Governance, just the same. They're really political scientists masquerading as members of a public policy professional school. They still teach undergraduates. They don't all have to be here in Sydney Smith for you to have access to them. So what fields did I miss? International relations, comparative politics, Canadian politics, and the specialized programs like ethics. Center for Ethics at Trinity College is not just for Trinity students. It's mostly staffed by political scientists, and it's open to you. Now, by the way, all of those venues I just mentioned, just to give a few examples, run an active series of programs, seminars, workshops, conferences. Now, it's not easy to find out about them. You have to look at websites. You have to keep your eyes open. You have to keep your ears open. And sometimes they're marketed pretty well on little devices that you check regularly. But sometimes not. Those are all open to you. You're welcome to attend. You think, oh, famous professor or General Dallaire coming to the Munk School. I shouldn't go to that. I'm just a new undergraduate. Baloney. He's here for you. He's here for you. So actually, when I go to those events and I see even very often, alum are welcome to attend. The alum, especially the retired ones, have a little more time, so they will often attend events like that. But when I look out at the audience and I see the average age is 55, I say, what's going on here? Where are the undergraduates? It's mostly for the undergraduates. The undergraduates are the essence of the university. All of these facilities, all these resources, all these seminars, workshops, etc., they're here for you. And they're voluntary. By the way, this young friend, former student, who did win a Rhodes Scholarship, what were the key moments for him? Going to events like these that I just mentioned, meeting somebody, getting to know them. One thing leads to another, and it's about networks. My son didn't graduate from our department, but he studied political science. The acorn didn't fall very far from the tree. His third year, I want to emphasize this, in his third year he did a semester abroad, and after his fourth year, he did an internship in Washington. Both of those opportunities led him to his career. People he met at conferences. He's now working on a PhD in nuclear security studies at MIT. What opened the door? A conference he went to as an intern in Washington. What led to the internship in Washington? His third year abroad. His one semester program where he met somebody. He actually was in a course with a retired diplomat who opened that door. What encouraged him to take the opportunity for a third year abroad? not me. Because he's in my field, you know, he needs a father, not a professor. So I've kept, you know, it was up to him to find his own opportunities, and he did. Now he's not, you know, he's a nice kid, and things kind of did fall into his lap. But you know what? Just because he was in the right place at the right time, because he put himself there, and he majored in the right subject, I have to say, as a professor, not a father. Okay, what else? You see, it's not hard for me to go 20 minutes, but I'm going to end with this. What about afterwards? But political science is a pretty good major or specialist program for opening doors for afterwards. Most of our students, just like me, I don't know about Rod, maybe he knew what he wanted to do from the get-go, but I certainly did not. Political science leaves lots of doors open. You know, when my son was in his program, and it was during that third year abroad, he met a government official. And, you know, he talked to him about, you know, as he was talking about this fellow's career path, I overheard the conversation. I obviously knew where he was coming from. And the conversation was like this. You know, if I'm interested in a career like yours, what should I do? And the official said, well, I'll give you one little bit of practical advice. These days in government service, and a lot of our students are at least thinking about public policy, or even, you know, working in an NGO, some kind of a position in the new governance structures in our globalizing, integrated world, and interested in kind of policy sorts of issues. He said, government service these days is not exactly a straightforward 35-year career. Get on the elevator and escalator and move up in lockstep fashion. It doesn't work like that. People work for a couple of years, then they go out and do something else, then maybe they come back, then maybe they work in a political campaign works, and they get invited back into government service. So the question is, what's your fallback for the times when you're not in government? If you're not in government service and on a straightforward career path. And he said that for most people, he knew it was at a high level. People who were thinking about graduate school, it was law school or some kind of professional school like the Munk School of Global Affairs, Kennedy School of Public Administration, right? Which could lead either to kind of an academic career or running something outside of government for a while and then going back into government service. Well, my son decided he didn't want to go to law school. A lot of our students decide they do want to go to law school, and it is a good fallback. And of course, political science is kind of the classic preparation for law school. But it's not the only track anymore. And I think it leaves a lot of, as you're choosing your courses in especially third and fourth year, keep that in mind. Keep in mind the idea that you might not want to go to law school, but you might want to go to a professional program. And therefore, you need probably to broaden out a little bit because you can't quite anticipate what the future is going to hold. So you take some courses that are maybe a little broader than you might have anticipated when you started the program. And also take advantage, there are two last things. International opportunities. It's the name of the game these days. You've got to get out of Canada to come back. You've got to have a little bit of experience in the world for the kind of the most attractive careers that I've seen our students pursue. Take advantage of international opportunities like, you know, we will have this kind of information available in the department. But the International and Research Information Fair, maybe others will be talking about this, October 30th, Sydney Smith Lobby. from 11 to 4. International Student Exchange Fair, November 6th, 11 to 4, Cumberland House on St. George Street. The Global Perspective Symposium, November 11 to 13, noon to 6:30, at various locations across the campus. If you can, free yourself up for just, even it could just be a summer experience. And since we now have May, June, July, and August free of class, unless you have to take a summer course, you can do a kind of visit abroad without compromising the courses that you're planning to attend. Do it if you can, even if you have to borrow a little bit of money. And the last thing is this basic idea, again, of matching what you're doing in the classroom with experiences outside the classroom. It's really important. The people who are going to help you open the door to a future career, you'll probably meet outside the classroom, somewhere at the University of Toronto, if you keep your eyes and your ears open. And our department will provide these opportunities. Have a good look at our website and take advantage of the wisdom of our staffers as well as professors. Thank you very much.
Since I don't have as finely calibrated a sense of timing as a professor, I would have a little aid here to keep me on track. So thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. I'm thrilled to be back in my home department, even though I haven't gone too far away in some ways because I work at U of T. But nice as these invitations are, they're also kind of a sign that you've reached a certain age in your life when people start asking you to talk about your experience. And while I may be at a certain age, I'm not old enough to have forgotten the skepticism that I felt when I was sitting in your seats and had to listen to various inspirational speeches from people. After all, everything I've heard about you and your generation, you just have to open any magazine to know that you are far more dedicated, focused, talented, and driven than I or my generation ever was. So perhaps your skepticism is very well founded today. So I stand here before you, admittedly, somewhat of an unlikely success, if we define success as being that I am fortunate enough to be engaged in meaningful, interesting work in support of a mission-driven organization, U of T. So that is my personal definition of success. It's not about what kind of car I drive or anything like that. It is really, as I say, having the benefit of meaningful work and feeling valued and recognized in the work that I do. So even if you take what I say with a grain of salt, when I talk about my personal experience, I'll share with you, sort of at the conclusion of my remarks, a little bit about what I hear from our graduates around the world. Because as was mentioned, I serve as AVP for Alumni Relations. So in that role, I get to meet with alumni all over the world. I get to hear about their experiences. And I'll share some of that with you. So you don't have to take my word for it. You can take the word of our alumni for it. So how did I get here? I was a kid from Hamilton. I came here in the 80s. I was a first generation student who came to U of T. My parents came here post World War II. My father fought with the Allied forces, landed in, he joined when he was 17, because his village was basically invaded by the Russians. So he ran away, joined the Allied forces in England, and arrived here in 1947, having not having gone, I think, beyond, grade 10 or 11. He worked at Stelco for 37 years, and I remember many things about my dad, but the thing that I remember most is the fact that he told me from the time I could remember the most important thing is for you to get an education. You have to get an education so you can be somebody. And I realized, that was a reflection of his experience as someone who worked in an interesting labor environment, someone whose English wasn't his first language, probably experienced all kinds of discrimination and so on, and that was, so his sense of education being linked to, personhood was actually really, quite profound to me, particularly in retrospect. So the fact that I came from this background had this, great emphasis on education as I was growing up. Have I just disconnected them?
No, just
No.
put it back on. Or leave it.
There we go. The fact that I studied political science, and I did a double major, political science and literary studies, it was a bit of an act of outrageous optimism, I suppose, because I probably should have been on a much more linear path to a clear job. And maybe you're thinking, well, back then you could study things like that because tuition was cheaper and, it wasn't as hard as it is now. Well, in some ways that's true. Tuition was cheaper, but, for my family it was not an insignificant investment. And, it was a time of a certain, looking back almost at times for cheerful nihilism. The Sex Pistols released God Save the Queen in 1977. By the time I came to school in the early 80s, we all danced to God Save the Queen, and we'd all cheerfully sing the No Future closing refrain of that song, not really realizing the full irony of that, but it was interesting. Interest rates when I graduated were just around 12% for a 5-year mortgage, so, real estate seems a little cheaper in retrospect, but interest rates were very, very high. So every generation faces its challenges, and certainly my generation felt that it faced its share of challenges. So I came here and was completely unprepared for what I discovered. I really didn't know what to expect, and what cemented my decision to study political science was an introductory course I took, I think it was Paul 104, with Professor Thomas Pangle, and it was a political philosophy course. And, like I said, I was a kid from Hamilton with pretty narrow perspective, and I had never heard anyone be so provocative and so challenging of almost every assumption that I held dear. And I will always remember that first lecture, and I walked out of that class and I knew that this was a path that I had to follow. And in fact, my emphasis in political science was political philosophy, and I have to say it was one of the more challenging things I ever did. I routinely felt completely lost, humiliated, and challenged, and in retrospect I wouldn't change any of it, because it, without that kind of pain and suffering, if you will, you realize that you don't really learn or achieve anything in life. And it was an incredibly rich experience. So what did political science do for me? It taught me how to think critically. It gave me the courage to challenge assumptions that I held dear, that others held dear. It gave me an appreciation for rigor, and it gave me an appreciation for hard work. What was my path when I left here? Well, when I left, I decided that I wanted to pursue graduate studies, but before I did that, I felt like I wanted to, this was still during the time of the Cold War, so I felt that I wanted to perfect some of my language skills. So I actually went to the Jagiellonian University in Kraków in Poland for a couple of years and was studying Polish and Russian. And it was a fascinating time to be there because, for those of you who know your history, martial law had been imposed in the early 80s in Poland, and when I was there in the second half of the 80s, it was a time of the Solidarity movement, and a lot of the push toward glasnost was really being fueled by this Solidarity movement in Poland. So it was a time when there was a lot of dissent that was very public, which was unheard of in this communist state. The priests were preaching dissent from the pulpit. There was incredible intellectual ferment going on. A lot of magazines that were, supposed to be underground magazines, but they were very public. There was a lot of subversive theater. It was a fascinating time to be there. Unfortunately, before the Iron Curtain came down, things got a little tense in Poland, and it did look as if martial law might be imposed again. So I came back and was going to pursue graduate studies when I ended up getting 3 job offers just through various connections that I had actually made while I was a student here. One of them was to be a research assistant to a blind man named Milton. If anyone knows anything about the author of Paradise Lost, he was also Milton. And he was blind. And so that struck me as an interesting irony. I didn't take that role, but I did work for a public affairs program that was run out of the St. Lawrence Center. We organized live public debates on issues of concern to the city. It was a job that paid $12,000 a year, and it, at that time, wasn't really enough to live on, but it seemed like a small fortune after being a student, and it was a tremendous education to everything that was going on in this city, and what the key issues were. And it was really democracy in action in a very participatory way, in practice, after having learned about it in theory and in political science. I've had a variety of jobs. I was in the Naval Reserves for a few years, and I don't know if I can still do it, but I used to be able to assemble and disassemble the official NATO force weapon, not quite blindfolded, but just about. While I was a student, I worked as a cleaner in residences. I've worked as a fundraiser. I've worked in public relations in theater. I've worked in support of vice presidents at the University of Toronto, and eventually ended up in alumni relations, and that's where I am today, obviously. So, one of the enduring lessons I think that I take away, and it's really that I took away from my education, that really only became apparent to me in retrospect, was the importance and power of narrative, and both in the workforce, in the political arena, and also in the sphere of your own personal development. I think it's only in times when you have to make choices in your life that you recognize really the power of narrative and the fact that you are the author of your own story. And while this may seem trite at this point, one of the things that I took away from literary studies was the power of naming. And once you name something, once you put a story around something, it takes on a reality. And you have the power to do that in the way that you start to tell your story to both your professors, to people that you meet, and the way that you discover other people's stories. And I think one of the challenges today is that when I think about what it must be like to be in the shoes of someone who's either studying or is just about to graduate, is there are so many people have appropriated the narrative of your generation, if you will. Everyone's talking about how difficult the economy is, how difficult it is for students to make their way in the world, et cetera, et cetera. And don't get me wrong, I mean, we face a lot of challenges in this world, but we also have, I think, more means at our disposal than perhaps we ever had before to address those challenges. And at the root, I think, is education. And I think that no matter what path you decide to choose, no one can take that away from you. No one can take your education away from you, and no one can take the skills and the strengths that you will take away from this experience, and you will be able to use those to create your story going forward. So thank you for letting me share my story with you today. I hope you find it helpful. And I'll just close, as I said, by just sharing a little bit with you from sharing with you what I hear from our graduates. I wonder if the graduate that you were talking about is Roland Paris, because I was just, yeah, he's another one. He just had an op-ed piece in the Globe, I think on Tuesday night, which was very, very interesting. He runs the equivalent of the Monk School at the University of Ottawa. He's a poli-sci grad, Moss Scholar from here. I don't know if he went on to get the Rhodes, but I know he started off with the Moss Scholarship. But what I hear from our alumni, and these are people in Toronto and around the world who've gone on to do such incredible things, and many of whom did not follow linear paths to get where they are. And if I had to kind of characterize what I hear from them into thematic areas, I think the two themes would be how hard it was. Everyone talks about how rigorous and challenging their experience was, but I have not yet met anyone who says, I wished it had been easier. Everyone says that it was so hard and so challenging, but the benefit of that was that no matter where they went, either for graduate school or what field they went into, they felt that they could hold their own, and they felt far better prepared than many of their peers. And they, in addition to that, they felt that the reputation of the university was something that raised their own value when others knew where they studied. The second thematic area that their comments would fall into, especially those who are in the position of being employers, and most recently, the partner of a Vancouver law firm shared this with the president during a conversation in Vancouver just last week. And the second common theme is when I hire, I'm not looking for job-ready graduates. I'm not looking for people who have been prepared to do a particular job. The workforce based on, these are our alumni talking, the workforce based on what I've seen in my career is so dynamic, it's constantly evolving. The idea that I would want to hire someone who's trained to do one specific thing, it makes absolutely no sense. We hear this all the time that we need people who know how to think. And that is so true, because the nature of the challenges, the nature of the problems are changing all the time. And we need people who can adapt to that and who can solve problems no matter what the circumstances are. And in that sense, university graduates and graduates who are coming from humanities and social sciences programs are highly desirable in that regard. So I leave those words with you from some of our graduates, and again, just thank you for your time and attention, and I think I have 2 minutes and 50 seconds to spare, so thanks.
How are we with time? I know it's 10 o'clock.
We're okay. You
Okay.
can get 15 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So, hello everyone. Before I tell you a little bit about myself, my adventures as a political science student, I would like to thank my friend Emily Choi, which I don't know if she's still here, Professor Haddo, as well as the political science department for inviting me to be a part of this event. I think these types of events are really telling of the tremendous support that U of T students receive from their faculties year to year. As well, I'm really excited to see more and more students taking a very big interest in the field. I think in a world that is constantly and rapidly changing, it's reassuring to know that your peers, as his future generations, are ready to be active participants and not merely passive observers. So to start us off, I would like to echo one of my favorite proverbs that continues to inspire me every day. I'm sure you've heard it from Emma Watson's speech, but I thought I'd say it here again. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? John Lewis definitely had it right. So it's hard to believe that it has been a little over 2 years since I was in the same exact position as you are today, asking myself the same questions over and over again. Do I fully understand what it means to study political science? What kind of expectations do I have of the field? And what do I hope to take away from my educational experience? This question has taken on an increasing importance now that I near the end of my undergraduate career, but I also wondered in what ways would studying political science help shape my postgraduate aspirations as well as my career goals. It's really fascinating how much we are programmed to think ahead. Or now that I think of it, I may have just been a very proactive and overly enthusiastic first-year student, but that's another story. But in all seriousness, the truth is that a large part of our lives involves planning, organizing, scheduling, and I'm afraid this only extends further into university life. What I'm trying to get at is that it's important to ask yourself these questions. It really does show that you are taking a primary role in shaping your own learning. So, although this summarizes in a nutshell what my early encounters with the field were like, little did I know how the study of political science would steer my interests and dreams into realistic and attainable possibilities. Little did I know that being a political science student went beyond coursework and acquiring knowledge of theories and concepts to meet degree requirements. My introduction to the field included a practical dimension as well that was oriented towards career development. From very early on, I was encouraged to focus my attention on the building of skill sets that I could apply working in the field. This pairing of the theoretical with the practical transformed my perceptions and made me realize how broad and encompassing political science as a field of inquiry really was. In other words, studying political science has meant for me striking this balance between politics as a theory and politics as a practice. Maintaining this juggling act between two distinctive, or what I thought so at first, yet complementary sides has allowed me to step into research and analysis of my own when it comes to looking at contemporary events with a more holistic approach. Today, I was also asked to talk a little bit about what I consider to be the most rewarding feature of my studies. To answer this, I would like to touch on a few points because I think it's important to highlight my different experiences as a student both inside and outside the classroom. In hindsight, I could not have even imagined what my political science degree would shape up to be. Perhaps the most valuable part of studying political science as such a research-driven institution is its interdisciplinary approach to learning. Whether you're a specialist, major, or a minor, you are invited to build your degree by drawing on a cross-section of related fields in international relations, economics, European studies, ethics and society and for law, for an example. And this is exactly what I did. So currently I'm a fourth year studying a double major in political science history with a minor in European Union studies. So every course selection, I was constantly reminded that I was not only receiving training as a Canadian political scientist, but very much as a global citizen leader, equipped to understand and tackle issues beyond these borders. Such a diverse array of courses, ranging from political philosophy to international foreign policy, could not be offered without the renowned and passionate faculty members who are willing to share their insights. Your professors and your TAs are truly windows to the world. I have to tell you that one of the best highlights of my educational experience was the freedom to interact with professors who were not only experts in the field, but also who could, as they taught and as they lectured, could also speak from personal experience. So can you imagine how it felt to be sitting in a seminar class across Canada's former ambassador to NATO, who helped shape the country's response to the downfall of the Soviet Union, and who was one of the key players in coordinating international action after the September 11th attacks? Can you imagine how it felt to learn from a correspondent who worked for Radio Free Europe, who on the eve of the collapse of the Soviet Union was on the ground in the region, reporting for the first time on the independence of the Baltic countries? Ambassador David Wright and Professor Robert Austin are one of many faculty members that I have to thank for making my time as a political science so special. As someone who has experienced this firsthand, being a political science student at U of T means that you're taking part in an interactive and collaborative method of learning. Once you get past those readings, your peers and professors are the people who will make you question things who will change your realities and who will provide direction in turning ideas into action. Lastly, do not be afraid to take your learning beyond the parameters of the classroom. The beauty of this program is a cross-cultural dialogue it stimulates. Attend those guest lectures, interact with experts in the field, and seek out both internship and volunteer opportunities that will show you what it is like to work in the field. Both the department at large, as well as the Association of Political Science Students, are great resources for this, so make sure that you reach out to them. Furthermore, I cannot emphasize enough that if an opportunity presents itself for you to study or conduct research abroad, do it. I was an international course module participant this past February, working with Professor Robert Austin's Enlarging Europe class. And I was given an opportunity to conduct an independent research project in Tbilisi, which is the capital city of the Republic of Georgia. Most people associate with the post-Soviet Union. So with funding from the university, I had my first engagement with field research. I had this amazing, exciting, enriched international experience and independence to conduct original research and contribute to the current discussion in the field. A group of about 8 of us went with Professor Austin for a week, and it was just so interesting to be able to reach out to these NGOs, to the EU partners organizations on the ground, and actually really incorporate their thoughts into my research that came together as a final paper. So these are just, this is just a small example of the opportunities that you can pursue abroad. So if there is a particular region you want to specialize in, or if there is a particular topic that you would like to explore more in depth, consider pursuing an independent study or a senior thesis project. So this year, I'm actually participating in a new research program that is located at Victoria College. It is called the Vic Capstone Research Colloquium. And as part of this program, I actually hope to return to the region, to Georgia, and continue my research on the future of European integration and European Union's involvement in the politics of transition countries, particularly in Southeastern Europe. So, if there's anything I hope you will take away from all of this, it is really to keep an open mind and be open to new possibilities. I think that, recognize that it's very helpful and it's okay to have a plan, but don't let that plan keep you from pushing your boundaries even more. So I wish you all the best of luck in your studies. Thank you.